The ship was old. Not broken, just old. The kind of old that meant every hallway smelled faintly of engine grease and recycled air, and the floor made a low hum under your boots that you stopped noticing after the first day. The EGV Roanoke had been running supply and diplomatic transit routes for 11 years, and it looked every one of them. Lynn Barber didn't mind. She had slept in worse places. She stood at the small window in her cabin and watched the station grow larger as the Roanoke moved into dock. Harith Saul was big. Bigger than she had expected, though she had read all the briefings and looked at all the photos. There was something the photos never got right about places this size. The way they just kept going, tier after tier, light after light, and somewhere in all of it, 40 different kinds of living things were eating and arguing and filing paperwork. She usually did. Behind her, Cole Finch was doing the thing he did when he was nervous, which was talk. Okay, so the Vahari greet with a sort of forward lean, not aggressive, just acknowledgement, and you're not supposed to make any sharp hand gestures during the first meeting, because it reads as challenge behavior, which I know sounds extreme, but there's a whole section in the briefing document about it, page 14. And also apparently the air in the lower tiers is slightly different, chemically, because of the coal, Lynn said. Yeah, we've done this before. You've done this before. I've read about it. He was standing in the doorway of her cabin with a tablet in both hands and the expression of someone who had been awake for too long, reading things that were supposed to calm him down and had not worked. She said, "You'll be fine." He said, "Statistically, probably." The Roanoke ducked with a low metal thud and a hiss of pressure sealing. Frank Sir, the captain, was already in the corridor when they came out with their bags. He was a big quiet man who had been doing this long enough that nothing surprised him anymore. He looked at both of them and said, "Don't start anything." Lynn said, "We never do." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he nodded once and walked back toward the bridge. The station received them with noise and color and the smell of 100 things cooking at once. Their escort was a Vahari official, mid-level, professional, efficient, whose actual name was something Cole couldn't say without his jaw doing something wrong, so he quietly called him Pell, and Pell seemed either unaware of this or too polite to say anything. Pell walked them through 3 levels of the station toward the diplomatic quarters. Lynn walked and looked. She always looked, not in an obvious way, not turning her head or pointing, just a steady, quiet attention that took everything in. The height of the ceilings, the way the crowd moved, which species gave way to which other species, and which ones held their line. These were the things the briefing documents didn't cover, and the things that mattered most. Cole walked and talked to Pell, who answered in careful standard tongue, and the two of them filled the air between them with the comfortable noise of 2 people who needed to fill air. The 3rd level of the station was the commerce tier. It was packed. Stalls and carts and moving bodies pressed together in that loose, organized chaos that forms wherever things are being bought and sold. Pell moved through it with practiced ease. Cole stuck close behind him. Lynn followed at her own pace, reading the space. She was passing a cargo exchange point, a loud argument in progress between a supply drone operator and a buyer, when something made her slow down slightly. Not a sound, not a movement, just a feeling in the air, the way a room sometimes changes before anything has actually happened yet. She didn't look directly at the source. She didn't need to. The Dravasi hauler was big. The heavy cast ones always were, wide across the shoulders, plated along the neck and upper back, built like something that had evolved in a place where being small was a liability. This one had been mid-argument, voice raised, one broad arm gesturing toward the drone operator, with the confidence of something that had never once in its life needed to check whether anything was going to argue back. It stopped. Mid-sentence. Mid-gesture. It just stopped. Lynn had already passed it. She wasn't looking at it. She was reading a sign above a food stall, the kind of idle noticing she did everywhere she went. She didn't register the hauler as anything other than background noise. The hauler watched her walk away. Its posture, for the 3 seconds it stood there, was not angry, not aggressive, not anything it had a clear word for. It was the posture of something that had just processed a piece of information it didn't ask for, and wasn't sure what to do with. Then it went back to its argument, but quieter. He was still talking to Pell. Their quarters were on the 7th level, diplomatic wing, standard allocation. 2 rooms with a shared common area and a window that looked out over the mid-tier docking bay. The furniture was designed for Vihari proportions, which meant most of it was slightly too low for human legs. But it was clean, and the temperature was right, and there was a functional outlet beside the main desk. Lynn unpacked in the order she always did. Coffee maker on the desk first, then her field kit, then her clothes, then her books, which were 2 paperbacks she'd had for years, and reread the way other people rewatched movies they loved. She was done in 11 minutes. Cole was still unpacking when she made her first cup of coffee and sat down with the station map on her tablet. She traced the routes between their quarters, the session rooms, the commissary, the observation decks. She marked the ones that would be useful and the ones that would waste time. She noted which corridors ran along the outer hull and which ones cut through the interior. Later, much later, she turned off her tablet and went to sleep. She did not know about the security footage that would be reviewed 3 days from now. She did not know that a Drevosi guard had been posted to their corridor that night, and had spent the entire 8-hour shift standing at the very edge of its assigned patrol range, 40 feet from her door, not a step closer, watching the door with the careful, unmoving attention of something that had decided, without being able to explain why, that the space immediately around it was the safer place to stand. The coffee maker was on the desk where it belonged. Outside her door, in the corridor, the guard stood in the same place all night. It had a word, in Drevosi, for the particular kind of stillness that comes over an animal when it is near something it cannot categorize. It was not fear exactly. It was older than fear. It was the feeling that something in the room has already decided how things will go, and that something is not you. And the smart move is to stay very still and wait to find out what it has decided. The guard stood still. Lynn slept. The station turned slowly through space, full of noise and life and the business of 40 different civilizations rubbing against each other. And in the diplomatic wing on the 7th level, one small cabin light clicked off, and the corridor outside it stayed very, very quiet. The session rooms on Harriet Sol were deep in the station's core, away from the noise of the commerce tiers and the hum of the docking bays. They were designed to be neutral, the temperature calibrated for 11 species at once. The air circulated through filters that kept any one species from smelling too strongly of itself. The lighting set at a flat, even level that gave nobody a shadow advantage. Lynn thought they smelled like an office building on a Monday morning, familiar in the worst way. The first session was about transit tariff structures. 3 hours of careful language about numbers that would not change significantly, no matter what anyone said. Pell opened it. A Vihari senior economist presented 17 slides. A species called the Chethar asked 4 clarifying questions, each of which took 12 minutes to answer. Cole took notes in the margins of his tablet, and occasionally caught Lynn's eye with the expression of a man drowning very slowly. Lynn took her own notes, different ones. She wrote down which delegates leaned forward when the numbers were in their favor, which ones went still when they didn't like something, and which ones went loud. She wrote down where Sorok stood, not at the table, but along the east wall, the security post. And she noted that it had repositioned twice in the first hour, without any apparent reason. Not restless, She'd seen Restless. This was something else. She wrote, Drevosi Security Officer East Wall. Repositioning at irregular intervals, not pattern consistent with standard protocol sweep. Possible environmental response. Monitor. She did not write what the monitoring revealed, because she didn't know yet. Sorok, for its part, would not have been able to explain its repositioning to anyone. It had moved the first time because something in the room felt wrong, in a way it couldn't locate. It had moved the second time for the same reason. Both times, it had scanned the room fully, every delegate, every aide, the equipment, the ventilation grates, and found nothing that explained the feeling. Both times, its scan had moved across Lynn Barber at the human table and kept going, because she was sitting still, reading her tablet, writing small, neat notes, and there was nothing there to flag. And yet, the session ended. The delegates filed out. Cole stretched his back and said something about how he hadn't understood at least 40% of what had been discussed, and was that normal? Lynn said yes, and packed up her tablet. The second session was 2 days later. It covered the same material from a different angle. This time, the room was slightly fuller. 2 extra Vahari aides, a Chethar legal observer, and a new addition at the far end of the table. Delegate Vosketh, the senior Vahari representative, who had apparently decided the tariff discussion was now worth attending in person. Vosketh was sharp. Lynn noticed that within the first 10 minutes. It had the quality of someone who was always running 2 conversations at once, the one being spoken aloud, and the one it was actually having somewhere behind its eyes. She made a note. There was a recess halfway through. Most of the room emptied. Cole went to find something to drink. Lynn stayed at the table. She was reading back through her first session notes when she heard the scatter of small things hitting the floor. A sharp, brief sound, followed by a young Vahari aide making a distressed noise and dropping to one knee. A stack of data chips, maybe 30 of them, had hit the floor near Lynn's feet and gone in every direction. Lynn put her tablet down and crouched. She picked them up, not because she was performing helpfulness, not because anyone was watching. She didn't check whether anyone was watching, just because the chips were on the floor and needed to be off it. She gathered them with the quick, efficient movements of someone used to picking up small things in a hurry, and then she straightened up and held them out. The aide took them. Lynn said, "There you go," and then she sat back down and picked up her tablet. The aide stood there. This was the thing Cole saw when he came back through the session room door with 2 cups of something warm and vaguely brown. The aide, young, mid-level, nervous in the way that young mid-level aides across every species tended to be nervous, was standing 3 feet from Lynn's chair with a stack of data chips and an expression that Cole had seen on exactly one other occasion in his life, which was on a very small rabbit that had frozen solid in the middle of a lawn because a dog had walked past it 30 seconds earlier. The dog was gone. The rabbit was still not moving. Cole put the cups down slowly and sat in his chair and looked at the tablet in front of him and tried to look like he hadn't just noticed something that he very much had. That night, he called Diane Pruitt. The relay took 40 seconds to connect. The screen resolved into Diane's face. Mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, the perpetual background of her office behind her, which included a wall of physical books that Cole had never once seen her take down from the shelf. He said, "Something is happening with Lynn." Diane said, "What kind of something?" He said, "The kind where she doesn't do anything and things keep happening around her anyway." Diane took her glasses off her head and set them on the desk. "Describe it." Cole described the aide, the frozen stillness, the way it had taken the chips and then simply not left. He described the repositioning of the Dravazi security officer. He described the hauler and the commerce tier, which he hadn't mentioned before because he hadn't been sure it meant anything, and now he was. When he finished, Diane was quiet for long enough that he checked the relay connection. Then she said, Describe how Lynn sits, not what she does. How she sits. Cole turned in his chair. Lynn was at the window on the other side of the common area, coffee in both hands, watching the docking bay below with the kind of attention that most people saved for things that were actively happening. A freighter was making a slow approach to berth 11. Nothing was happening. Lynn was watching it like she had all the time in the world and had already decided how it was going to arrive. Cole said like she's already at where she's going, like the getting there is just the part that takes time. Diane sat back. She picked up a pen and held it without writing anything. She said, "Okay." Cole said, "That doesn't sound like okay." Diane said, "It's not bad. It's just, I need to pull some research. Don't try to change anything. Don't tell her. Just keep watching." Cole said, "Watching what specifically?" Diane said, "The room. Watch what the room does when she's in it." The call ended. Cole sat in the dark of the common area and thought about that for a while. Across the station, in the security office on the 5th level, Sorok was filing its end-of-shift report. It had filed these reports for 9 years on Hareth Sol. They were always the same length, the same format, the same flat descriptive language. This one was different. Under the field marked "Items requiring further monitoring," it had written the human liaison's name, her room number, her role. Under the field marked "Rationale," it had written 3 words, and then deleted them. Written 4 different words, and deleted those 2. It sat for a while, looking at the empty field. Then it wrote, "Unable to specify." Filed the report. Turned off the terminal. Stood in the empty office for a moment. Then it went back to check the corridor outside the diplomatic wing one more time. Just to check. Diane Pruitt connected to the official relay channel 2 days later, and said she needed an hour with Cole and Frank Sutter both. Frank said he had 20 minutes. Diane said that would probably be enough if he paid attention. They sat in the small conference room off the Roanoke's secondary docking bay. Frank in his usual chair with his arms crossed, Cole with his tablet, the relay screen showing Diane's office and Diane's face, and Diane's wall of books that had never once been touched. Outside the window, Hareth Sol turned slowly. Lynn was not there. She was at a session. Cole had checked. Diane said, "I want to tell you about persistence hunting." Frank said, "I know what persistence hunting is." Diane said, "You know the words. I want you to understand what it means." Frank looked at the ceiling, said nothing. Which was, Cole had learned, Frank's version of fine, go ahead. Diane pulled up a display that showed a simple map, an open plain, 2 shapes moving across it. One shape moved fast, darting, changing direction. The other moved in a straight line at a steady pace. She said, "This is what humans did for most of their evolutionary history. Not every hunt, but this one, the persistence hunt. You find something, you follow it. Not fast, you can't outrun most prey animals over a short distance, but you follow it, and you keep following it. And the key thing, the part that matters, is that you don't stop." Frank, "Animals tire out. We didn't." Diane, "Partly that. Humans can sweat. Most prey animals can't regulate their heat the same way. They overheat and have to stop and rest. A human can keep moving in midday heat when almost nothing else can. But it's not just the biology. It's the commitment. A persistence hunt can take 2 hours, sometimes 6, sometimes a full day. The human never speeds up, never changes expression, never gives any sign that it might stop or turn back or lose interest. Cole, "It just keeps coming." Diane, "It just keeps coming. And at some point in that chase, not at the end, not when the animal is already collapsing, but somewhere in the middle, the animal knows. It turns back, and it sees the human still there, same pace, same direction, not gaining, but not gone. And something fires in its nervous system. that is older than thought. It knows it has been claimed. It knows that whatever is following it has already decided how this ends. The room was quiet for a moment. Frank uncrossed his arms. Diane said, "Now most apex predator species in the known galaxy evolved their own version of a persistence hunt, or evolved to compete with something that did, and because of that, they carry a recognition system for it. A neurological tripwire. Something in the deep old part of the brain that is specifically watching for, patient, forward committed, destination certain, not going to stop. Because recognizing that in another creature is a survival skill. If something is following you, the way a persistence hunter follows prey, you need to know. Fast," Cole said, "and Lynn." Diane said, "Lynn grew up in rural Kentucky. She spent years walking fields and sitting in deer stands in the early morning dark. She has done 4 diplomatic postings in locations that other people declined. She unpacks her coffee maker first because she knows she'll be there a while. She watches rooms the way her ancestors watched planes. Not aggressively, just fully, patiently, completely, with the particular quality of someone who has already decided they will be there at the end of whatever this is." Frank, "She's not hunting anything." Diane, "No. She hasn't been hunting anything in 20 years. The patience is still there. The quality of presence, unhurried, not performing calm, already arrived in her own mind before she gets there physically. It's all still there. She carries it the way people carry an accent from a place they left a long time ago. She doesn't know she has it. She's not doing it on purpose. It's just how she moves through space." Frank looked at the wall. Cole said, "And the Drevosi?" Diane, "Are persistence hunters. One of 3 species in the known galaxy that evolved the full package. So when Sorak looks at Lynn, something in a very old part of its nervous system is not seeing a human diplomat reading a tablet. It is seeing the shape of something that hunts the way it hunts, something that has already decided how the end of the chase looks. And it cannot find a category for that, because nothing has ever done that to Sorak before. Nothing has ever made it feel like the slower animal in the room." She let that sit. Then she said, "She is not doing anything wrong. She is not doing anything at all. She is being a human being in a room full of nervous systems that were built to recognize exactly what a human being looks like." Cole said, "What does it look like?" Diane said, "The last thing in the field." Frank was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do we do about it?" Diane said, "Nothing. You let her do her job. Just watch the room." She disconnected. That same afternoon, Lynn went looking for coffee. The machine on her level was broken, a paper notice taped over the panel, the Vihari equivalent of out of order. She went up 1 level. That machine was working, but out of the dark roast she preferred. She went down 2 levels to the observation corridor near the secondary docking bay, because she had noticed a commissary cart there 2 days ago, and remembered it was still there. It was. The coffee was fine. Not good, but fine. She stood at the wide observation window at the end of the corridor and drank it. The docking bay below was busy. A large Vihari freight carrier was making its final approach to Berth 9, a slow, careful arc. The kind of movement that required total commitment once you started it, because you couldn't correct halfway through. She watched it come in, the way the ship committed to its line, and held it. She didn't hear Sorak come up beside her. Not because it was quiet, it was. Drevosi moved quietly for their size. But because she was watching the freighter, and she had no reason to be alarmed. And Lynn Barber was not the kind of person who startled easily. She said, "They're going to have to adjust left at the end." Sorak said nothing for a moment. Then it looked at the approaching ship. Then it said, in standard tongue, "Yes." They watched together. The ship adjusted left at the end, exactly as she said, and settled into the berth, with a low sound they felt more than heard through the floor. Lynn drank her coffee. Sorak said, "You have been watching the bay often." She said, "It's interesting." Sorak said, "My people have a word for the way large vessels commit to a docking approach. It translates roughly as the point where the decision has already been made. About the shape that working too long puts into a person's body and never fully leaves. About 4 postings, the one before this, the one before that. The succulent in her apartment she watered over video call because she was never there long enough to water it in person. She said, "I've been running on empty since I was about 14. You stop waiting to feel full. You just keep moving." She wasn't making a point. She wasn't giving a speech. She was just answering the question because it deserved an answer. She finished her coffee, nodded once at Sorak, walked back up the corridor toward the session schedule on her tablet. Sorak stood at the window for another 20 minutes. It watched the second ship come in. Same slow arc, same committed line. No variation, no hesitation, just the steady travel of something that had already decided on its destination a long time ago. It thought about Lynn's voice when she said, "Keep moving." Simple. Like she was describing the weather. That night, Sorak revised its security report. Under items requiring further monitoring, deleted. Under rationale, blank. It filed the report, turned off the terminal, sat in the quiet of the security office for a long time. Outside, through the wall of the station, space did what it always did. Nothing. In every direction. Forever. Sorak found that tonight, oddly less unsettling than usual. Nobody invited the Garathi. That was the first thing Pell said when he came through the door of the prep room 20 minutes before the session was supposed to start. And his voice had the particular quality of someone who was working very hard to sound calm and not quite managing it. Cole looked up from his tablet. Define nobody. Pell said, "No Vihari clearance, no advance notice, no formal request. They submitted a presence declaration this morning. They are already on the station." Lynn said, "How many?" Pell said, 4. A full delegate group. Their lead is Kasvar. Cole looked at Lynn. Lynn was looking at her notes. She said, "Kasvar, the one who broke up the Marin Trade Summit 3 years ago." Pell said, "Yes." Cole said, "And then the one on Tavan Station before that." Pell said, "Yes." Cole said, "So what they do is they show up uninvited, make the room feel like it's their room, and then whoever is too uncomfortable to stay leaves, and then the people who are left have already lost something just by having stayed." Pell looked at him with the expression of someone who was unhappy about how accurate that was. Lynn said, "Well, let's go to the session then." She picked up her tablet and her thermos and walked to the door. Pell watched her go. Cole grabbed his things and followed. The session room was already full when they arrived. The Garathi were there before any of the other delegations. This was, Cole knew, deliberate, taking the room before anyone else could claim any of it. Kasvar was at the far end of the table from the door, which was the wrong end if you wanted a fast exit, and the right end if you wanted to watch everything that came through the opening. Kasvar was big. All Garathi were large, but Kasvar had the particular size of something that had grown into its authority over many years and felt completely natural inside it. It was standing rather than sitting, which immediately made the room feel like the table was optional. Like the whole structure of the session was just a suggestion that Kasvar had agreed to entertain for now. The other delegations came in and took their places. The Chethar observers sat close together. The Vihari aides found positions near the walls. Pell went to his seat and sat in it very carefully, the way you sit when you are trying not to draw attention. Even Sorak, at its usual post on the east wall, had shifted its weight in a way Cole had not seen it do before. Not afraid, just recalibrated, taking in the new variable. Kasvar was already talking before Voskev had finished sitting down. It did not introduce itself. It spoke about the tariff negotiations as though it had been part of them from the beginning, and the tone of its voice had a specific quality that Cole had read about but not heard before. The kind of voice that doesn't argue exactly, but takes up so much space that other voices have less room to exist. Two of the Vihari aides stopped typing. One of the Chethar observers leaned back in its chair, which in Chethar body language was an early exit signal. Cole felt the room's temperature change, not literally, just that thing that rooms do when something in them has shifted. And then he looked at Lynn. She was sitting in the human corner. She had been sitting in the human corner since they arrived, same as every other session. Tablet open, thermos at her right hand, notepad with her small, fast handwriting. She was watching Kosvar with the same quality of attention she brought to everything. Patient, flat, complete. Not a performance of anything, just fully there. She had not moved. She had not reacted. She had not looked away. Kosvar was mid-sentence, mid-gesture, one broad arm extended, making a point about transit corridor rights when it happened. A hitch. Half a second, maybe less. Kosvar's voice didn't stop, and its body didn't stop, and anyone who wasn't watching carefully would have seen nothing. But Cole was watching carefully, because Diane had told him to watch the room, and he saw it. Kosvar's eyes found Lynn, and something changed. Not in its posture, not in its voice, not in anything Cole could have put a name to if someone asked him afterward to explain what he had seen. Just a change in the quality of the space around Kosvar. The way a flame changes when a window opens somewhere and there is suddenly a draft the flame didn't expect. Kosvar kept talking, but the arm came back in, slightly. The volume, when Cole listened for it, had dropped half a register from where it had been 10 seconds ago. The wide, space-filling movement that had been pushing the boundaries of the room began very subtly to compress, and the eye contact, the direct, sustained, pressure-applying eye contact that Kosvar had been using on Vosketh and the Chethar observers, did not go to Lynn, not once, for the rest of the session. Kosvar did not look at the human corner, not because it was unaware of it. Cole was entirely sure it was aware of nothing else. The session ran for 90 minutes. It ended without resolution, which was the Garathi goal. Leave the table fractured, leave the other delegations uncertain about what had just happened, and what it meant. In that sense, Kosvar had done its job. But it had not done the other thing, the thing it always did, the thing it had done at Marin and Tavin and 6 other stations before that. The systematic isolation of the most visibly shaken delegate, the closing in, the final pressure that turned fractured into broken. It had not done that. The Garathi left together, 4 of them through the door, Kosvar last, moving without hurry, the way large, confident things always move. In the corridor outside, Cole heard Pell say to Vosketh, in Vihari, which Cole could follow if he concentrated, "That didn't go the way it usually goes." Vosketh said, "No." Pell said, "What changed?" Vosketh looked back at the session room door. Then he said, "The quiet one, at the human table." Pell said, "She didn't do anything." Vosketh said, "No." Cole filed that away. In the session room, Lynn was packing up her tablet. She capped her thermos. She flipped back through her notepad to the Kosvar entry she'd been building throughout the session. Entrance posture, positioning, sightline management, volume pattern, exit angle. She added 2 lines at the bottom. Then after a gap, she wrote something separate from the clinical notes. She wrote, "My dad used to take me out to the fields before the sun came up. We'd sit for hours sometimes. He said the deer always knew when you'd really decided. Said you didn't change anything. Didn't move different or breathe different. It just knew. He said that was the only thing that mattered, that you had decided. Everything else was just time passing." She looked at what she'd written for a moment. Then she closed the notepad and put it in her bag. Cole was waiting at the door. He looked at her with the expression of someone who had a lot of things he wanted to say, and had decided to start with the simplest one. He said, "You know what just happened, right?" Lynn said, "Kosvar ran a room pressure display. I watched it." Run one, Cole said. I think the watching was the problem. Lynn said, that tracks. She picked up her bag. Cole held the door. They walked back through the station, toward their quarters, through the noise and movement of the commerce tiers, and the long straight corridors of the diplomatic wing. And Lynn walked the way she always walked, loose, unhurried, taking up exactly the space she needed, and not 1 inch more, already thinking about what the next session would look like. Behind them, 3 levels up, Kosvar stood at a viewport in the Garathi transit suite and looked out at the station's exterior plating. It was thinking about a woman at a table with a thermos and a notepad, who had not moved and had not reacted, and had watched it work the way you watch something you have already fully understood. It could not explain why this bothered it. The full Earth delegation arrived on a Tuesday. 12 people in formal clothes, with prepared remarks, and a carefully managed schedule, and the particular energy of people who understood that they were representing something larger than themselves, and had been thinking about that for the entire transit. They came through the docking bay with the deliberate, self-aware movement of people who knew they were being watched. Lynn met them at the bay entrance, handed over her documentation, gave a 20-minute briefing on the Vihari delegation's communication patterns, and the current state of the tariff discussions, answered 8 questions, and was done by noon. Her job was finished. She went back to her quarters and started packing. Coffee maker first, same as always. Then her field kit. Then her books. The room came apart in reverse order of how she had built it. Each thing going into her bag with the neat, practiced speed of someone who had done this enough times that packing felt less like leaving and more like returning to the natural state of things, which was, for Lynn, the state of being ready to go somewhere. She did not feel sad about leaving. She rarely did. That was not the same as not caring. Cole found her when she was almost done. He stood in the doorway of her room and looked at the half-empty space and then at her, and he had the expression he always had when he was about to say something that mattered to him and was trying to decide whether to say it in a way that was real or a way that was manageable. He went with real. He said, "You know what happened here, on this station. You know what you did." Lynn folded her last shirt. "Put it in the bag." She said, "I wrote reports and drank bad coffee." Cole said, "Lynn." She said, "Let's not make it weird." She zipped the bag, put it over her shoulder, looked at him. He looked back. He was 26 and from New Jersey, and he talked too much, and he had spent 2 weeks on a station 40 light-years from Earth, watching something he didn't have full language for yet. And he was going to spend the next year trying to find the language. She could see that in his face. She thought he would probably find it. She said, "You'll be good at this." He said, "I know. I'm already good at this." She almost smiled. They walked together to the departure bay. It was a long corridor. Other delegations moved around them. Vihari officials on their way to somewhere. A group of Chethar observers who had extended their stay. 2 of the New Earth delegates walking fast with that slightly lost energy of people still learning the station's layout. The corridor was full of the ordinary noise of a place doing its work. Lynn walked through it the way she walked through everything, not fast, not slow, looking where she was going. At the entrance to the departure bay, Cole stopped. She stopped too. He said, "Do you ever wonder why you keep requesting these postings?" She said no. He said, "Do you know why?" She thought about it for a moment, genuinely thought about it, the way she thought about things, not performing consideration, just actually doing it. She said, "I'm good at watching, and places like this need watching." Walked into the departure bay. Srock was in the corridor on the other side. It was not on patrol. It was not passing through on the way to somewhere else. It was standing in the corridor outside the departure bay entrance, with the deliberate, specific stillness of something that has decided to be in a particular place and is done explaining itself about it. Lynn stopped. She waited. Srock was quiet for a moment. Then it said, in standard tongue, which it used rarely and carefully, I have been in 41 diplomatic postings, 30 years of interspecies contact at stations across 6 sectors. Lin said nothing. She was listening. Srock said, in that time, I have never altered my reading of an environment because of one delegate's presence. I have never felt the need to revise a security assessment based on something I could not document. Lin said, okay. Srock said, you are not a delegate. Lin said, no, I just watch. Srock looked at her. It had very old eyes. Not in the way of age, but in the way of something that had seen a great number of things over a great number of years, and had developed a kind of stillness from having seen them. It looked at Lin the way it looked at a docking approach that was going to require adjustment. Not worried, just fully accounting for the thing in front of it. It said, my people have a term. It does not move cleanly into standard tongue. It describes something that does not need to announce its presence, something the territory already knows is there before it takes a single step. Lin waited. Srock said the word. It was 2 syllables, hard at the start, softer at the end. It sounded like a door closing, not slamming, just settling into its frame. Done. Lin said, I'll take that. She did not ask what it meant. She picked up her bag and walked. Srock watched her go. The walk, that walk, unhurried, loose, ground-eating, with the forward committed quality of something that was already at its destination, and was just traveling the distance between now and then. The kind of walk that covered ground without appearing to try. The kind of walk that never slowed down, never hesitated, never gave any sign that it might stop. Srock watched until she turned the corner and was gone. It stood there for a moment after. The corridor was ordinary. Other people moved through it in both directions, doing ordinary things. Nothing was different about the space she had just left. And yet Srock stood there anyway, the way you stand in a place after something significant has moved through it, just letting the moment be what it was before you return to everything else. Then it went back to work. Frank Sutter was waiting at the Roanoke's airlock when Lin got there. He had his arms crossed, and his expression of a man who was neither happy nor unhappy about anything, which was his baseline expression, and which Lin had learned meant he was paying attention. She said, "Are we on time?" He said, 10 minutes. She nodded, went aboard, stowed her bag, sat down in her berth, and looked out the small porthole at HFY. The Roanoke undocked with the same low hum it always made. The station began to shrink. Frank appeared in the doorway of her berth. He stood there for a moment. He said, "Good work." Lin said, "I mostly sat in meetings." He said, "Yeah." He left. She watched HFY through the porthole. The tears of it, the lights, the slow movement of ships around it, like something orbiting a small sun. She thought about the words Srock had said. She turned it over in her mind the way you turn a stone over. Not to understand it, just to feel the shape of it. She thought about fields in Kentucky in the early morning dark, the cold that got into your jacket no matter how good the jacket was. Her father's voice, low and unhurried, saying the deer always knows when you've decided. She thought about what it meant to have decided. To be the kind of person who decides and then just keeps moving toward what they decided. Without drama, without announcement, because there was no other way to be. She thought about her mother's hands and all the years in them. She opened her tablet. The station was just a light now, the same size as everything else out there, and then smaller, and then gone. She started writing her next posting request. Not because she had to, not because someone was pushing her toward it. Just because there were other stations out there and other rooms that needed watching, and she was good at it, and she was already packed. The Roanoke moved through space in a straight, committed line. Lin wrote. Outside the porthole, the stars did not move.